Greetings from Costa Rica, folks, and welcome to this weekly Costa Rica Matt Chat. My name is Matt Rosensteel. It is a pleasure to have you with me. Today's topic is a very simple one because we have some extremely exciting news here in Guanacaste. Was this yesterday, just yesterday, or was it actually 2 days ago? I can't remember right now because everything is blurring together here with the high season. Yesterday, here in Guanacaste, so in honor of getting our first little drips and drabs of rain, I wanted to talk about the transition to the rainy season here, what you should expect so that you can get an idea of the weather and how it pans out. And I also want to talk about what you should do. And briefly, obviously, to pay respect to anybody watching who speaks Spanish, quisiera explicar un poco sobre el tema de hoy. Muchísimas gracias por mirar mis videos. Hoy estoy explicando el tema de la transición de la temporada seca hacia la temporada de lluvia aquí en Guanacaste, ya que hemos recibido, gracias a Dios, las primeras gotitas de agua. Cayeron ayer las lluvias cafetaleros. Aquí en Guanacaste más bien son las, no son para cafetaleros, pero sí estamos muy alegres tener esas lluvias. Entonces voy a estar explicando el tema de la transición, el clima y ofreciendo información sobre la realidad climática aquí en Costa Rica. Si habla el español y quisiera contactarme, mi dirección de correo electrónico es matt@costaricamat.com. Siempre estoy explicando en inglés porque mi meta es educar a los extranjeros que llegan aquí al país. So anyhow, I did want to explain the topic of today's episode in Spanish so that anyone watching out there might understand what I'm talking about, which is the transition to the green season here in Guanacaste, aka the rainy season. You will hear realtors call it the green season as a nice way to make it sound less dreary than the rainy season. But the reality is, yes, during this time of year, Guanacaste gets a good amount of rain. Here in March, and in fact, March 28th is a pretty early date for us to get our first rains of the year. Last year, we did have 4 days with some very moderate rain in March. That tends to be the exception to the rule in recent years here in Guanacaste. Let's go back and talk about the general climate just a minute. Here in Guanacaste, obviously, we are alternating between dry and rainy seasons. The dry season starts in November, December, and until April, we rarely see a single drop of rain. This year, we also got a little bit in January here in our area, which is just south of Tamarindo on the western sort of elbow of the Guanacaste Peninsula, the Nicoya Peninsula, rather. But other than that, we hadn't had any other rain since November. Every year around April and May, we transition back to our rainy season, and it can be a very different process depending on the overall cycle that we're in, sort of with La Nina and El Nino. Those are the cooling or warming of the Pacific Ocean off to our west. And of course, just like everything in recent years, both of those effects have become more dramatic, more pronounced, and the effects that they can have on Central America's climate have also become very extreme. So last year we had an El Nino year, which typically provokes less rainfall in Costa Rica. This year we are quickly seeing La Nina, the cooling of the surface of the Pacific out to the west of us, and we are expecting more rain than usual. Our rainy season goes from April through November, and really for the first 3 or 4 months of it, you rarely see what you would call monsoon rains or those deluges that can be something that people worry about when they're imagining the tropics. In April, May, even June and July, we are still going to only see occasional afternoon showers. And in fact, it could be that in April, we don't get another dose of rain because it can be an entirely dry month after we see, initial precipitation. May, we should start to see a little bit more regularity with those showers in the afternoons. And then in pushing on into June and July, especially June, we would see even more regularity. The wonderful thing is that absolutely in April, you're going to see so little rainfall in most typical years that you would have almost no reason not to travel to Costa Rica or to avoid, certain areas. May and June, July, really, you can still have wonderful vacations here in Guanacaste and expect that 80 to 90% of the time that you're here, it's going to be dry, beautiful sunshine weather. It is important to note, you could come and catch a week of rainfall in one of those months, so please don't blame Costa Rica Matt if you accidentally end up here in a week that it just pours in June or July. So really, May, June, and July, the beginning of the rainy season, can be quite moderate. In El Nino years, where the effect is drying out Guanacaste and we're seeing more drought conditions, you may see that there's less than 10 inches of rain in those 3 months, which for us is very little. I believe our last El Nino, the significant effect that really created drought here in 2014 and 2015, in those rainy seasons here in our area south of Tamarindo, we got just under 30 inches of rain the whole year. 30 inches may sound like a good amount and a big number, but to compare it to a different year like last year or one of our rainier years, I'm trying to keep everything straight here, we can see up to 4 or 5 meters of rainfall. And I want to convert that to inches really quick here. We're talking 150 to 180 inches of rain in one of those really rainy years. It can be shocking to see that those deluges can dump so much quantifiable rainfall in a single event. Let's continue working chronologically through the year here. We've talked about the early rainy season, May, June, July. In Guanacaste, long ago, July had a very dependable 2 or 3 week break in the rainy season. It was the canicula, or the El Veranillo de San Juan, the little summer of San Juan, which begins with, the San Juan Holy Day was the first day that you used to see. Always the weather would change a little bit, the winds would come in, and things would dry out for those 2 weeks in July. It's absolutely perfect because it falls along with a huge holiday here in Guanacaste. And so typically that July break in the rainy season can be a spectacular time for people to come out and enjoy the coast. Moving into August, September, and October, we see the peak of our rainy season. And it's not till those months that you really need to worry about flooding or, rivers really surging like you see in this photo. There are a lot of places in Guanacaste where there are simply not bridges across seasonal rivers. And August, September, and October are normally the months that you would see when you can't cross those rivers. The one that I just showed is right down the road from us, and it's a perfect example of a place where you get a heavy rainstorm in September, and quickly the river floods above where you would want to drive. Now, as soon as the rain stops, that river is dropping down again, but it can be a very interesting factor with the terrain and accessibility here in Guanacaste. Perhaps one of the biggest examples in our area is the Ostional River that cuts off access from Nosara anywhere north. That bridge, that river comes out of a major watershed. It floods a lot. They get more rain down south than we do up here. And it frequently causes heartache for people in that area who wish they could cross the river in one direction or another. Obviously, it also makes it difficult for people to go see the turtles there. And that flooding can actually sort of act as a natural barrier to keep people out of the Ostianal Park at times. So September and October are absolutely the rainiest months in Guanacaste consistently every year. You would typically see bigger storms happening in October than you would in September. We hope that sometime in those 2 months, we get a continual rainstorm that sort of parks itself over Guanacaste. That rain won't just be absolute pouring rain for 2 weeks, of course. It goes from drizzles up to medium stuff. At times it will pour. It's called a temporal, Temporal. We hope that one of those storms comes sometime in September and October, because those can be absolutely critical to recharging aquifers in our area. And like I mentioned earlier, those big deluges, if we're talking about a year where we get 150 inches of rain, sometimes you can see 20 to 30 of those inches fall in a couple nights during that temporal. One of the things that I've always been amazed at measuring rainfall here in Guanacaste, the difference between a drizzle for 6 hours, which can leave 3/10 of an inch of rain, just really this much water, and a deluge, which can then dump 3 inches of rain in that same amount of time. Actually, I'm sorry, 3 inches of rain in much less time. So basically, these drizzles can last all day, and the amount of water that's coming down is quantifiably small. When things really get pouring and you get those buckets of rainfall, you're seeing, parabolically more water falling every second. And really, you can start to add up the inches of rainfall that you're measuring locally. So if you're planning on traveling to Costa Rica here over the next few months, do not worry about the green season necessarily ruining your plans if you're here in Guanacaste. I would predict that we're only going to see maybe 7 or 8 days of rain between here and May. Hopefully we see a lot more and we actually get a transition to the rainy season. But really, you wouldn't see stronger rains until we move further into the year. And until really August, you can plan your vacation knowing that even if it's going to rain here, it's only going to be an hour and a half, 2-hour shower in the afternoon, normally in May, June, and July, when a lot of folks want to visit. So what should you do in preparation for the green season? Well, the wonderful thing about living in Costa Rica is the opportunity to plant. And in fact, the first thing I did yesterday, as soon as the soil was moist, was start planting things around my property that I want to have growing this next 5 or 6 months that come up. It is incredible how fast trees grow in this region. If you want shade around your property, plant an almendro de playa, add phosphorus underneath so that the roots get really established, give it lots of room in a sunny spot, and you may get 6 or 7, maybe even more feet of growth out of an almendro de playa. If you want year-round greenery, if you really want to get sort of a tall evergreen tree, I highly recommend looking for ojoches, which are only going to like sort of lowland conditions. Ojoches have this unbelievable shade. They also produce one of the world's most nutritious nuts, if your tree turns out to be female. The ojoche is great. Another tree that's absolutely amazing is the caimito. Here in Guanacaste, it's a native fruit. I think in English it's called a star apple, or something like that. It does this purple fruit. The caimito trees that I have on my property, I planted at the beginning of a rainy season 10 years ago when they were less than 2 or 3 feet tall. And both of them are now way up above our 2-story roof. We have monkeys coming and stealing every one of the fruits, but they're these gorgeous, magnificent shade trees. And planting right now, you can get stuff in the ground that will get its tap roots going downward and be established enough for the next dry season so that you don't have to water. And that's really the critical thing is if you plant right now, you're able to get things established enough that by November, when we turn back to the dry season, you're going to see that the plant has done as much as it possibly can to prepare for that dry season, especially if we're talking about native species trees here in Guanacaste. I do want to open up one quick opportunity if there's anyone out there who wants to ask a question about the rainy season here in Guanacaste, or if you'd like to throw something completely random out, you're also welcome to do so. I had meant to mention, in addition to the fact that I have close to 400 Costa Rica videos on my channel, I have organized the top real estate information videos into my ultimate real estate playlist. If you would like information on taxes, water, electricity, the buying process, etc., this is the playlist to visit. All you have to do is open up your phone's camera function, hold it up to the computer, hold it up to the computer and scan the code, tap the link that comes up so that you've got those, I think, 15 or 16 critical real estate videos from my playlists. It does not sound like we have any other questions or any questions. So without further ado, I'll be happy to say Happy Viernes Santo. Feliz Viernes Santo a toda la gente tica. Vamos a estar festejando nosotros también. This weekend is a big one here in Costa Rica. We will be happy to start it here. Thanks very much for watching, folks, and see you next week live Friday at noon.